Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of EdTech on the Street in the city that never sleeps. We are joined today by our CEO, Acky, right near Bryant Park in this kind of like hidden arboretum situation that I've never been to until today. So good find, Acky.
I've always been coming here. Starbucks coffee's next door, and this is perfect place to meet.
Yeah, it's very, very quiet away from the city noise. So
Yep.
perfect for our interview today.
Right by the Bryant Park.
Yes, awesome. Well, before we start all of these conversations, we always start with an icebreaker. And since we are in somewhat of a garden, my question for you is, if you were a plant, what plant would you be and why?
Plant. I'd love to be a rose tree, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any reason why? Or just feeling like rose is where that's like your spirit animal, but as a plant?
Rose comes in many colors and has amazing fragrance, especially from where I come in India. Roses are a national flower. Well, I shouldn't say national flower, but it's very popular.
Yeah.
And it has amazing fragrances out there.
Oh, cool.
It also gets into some of our, dessert treats, sweet treats. So
Oh, very good.
we use rose in many of our preparations.
I do love a good rose tea, so I
Yes,
think
rose teas. I forgot about that. Yeah.
that would have been my choice as well, because I just love a good rose tea. So awesome. Well, now we're going to jump into our discussion for today around, of course, EdTech, education, AI, and where the future is going for the industry. So starting with our first question, from where you sit as a CEO, what do you think is the biggest change happening in the EdTech industry right now, and why does it matter?
Unfortunately, I have to say AI.
Unfortunately or fortunately.
Yes. But I think we've moved beyond should we or should we not AI. I think today I'm more concerned about the adoption of AI and the purpose and intention. I think when I look at our own use of AI within Magic, I always challenge my team that are you getting what you want out of it? And the other thing is it's not very, it's kind of, sometimes I feel very random. My different functions don't tend to use AI all the time. Then certainly there's burst of activity and, and then there's some amount of frustration, disappointment in terms of what outcomes they get. And then when we look at what we are doing for our customers in building, AI-based workflows for our customers, they're also, one of the things we are talking to our clients about is the sustainable adoption, which is, adoption over a longer period of time, and then trying to see if we are able to measure the returns and outcomes. Can we attribute what we're getting out of it to because we put AI in place or we've done something else over there? So I think all of us are going to be very focused on the effective use of AI or adoption of AI in a very sustainable manner, and also start looking at the ROI and are we really getting the outcomes that we have thought we should get or that we've been saying that we should get.
Yeah, I really like the point though in terms of outcomes. And I know recently Goldman Sachs was releasing information in terms of what was the overall economic impact from AI as an industry. And some people were shocked to see that there really wasn't any huge positive impact on the economy from just AI. And I feel like it goes back to adoption and outcome driven rather than just saying, oh, we're using AI to sprinkle in that we're using AI in that sense.
Yes.
So,
but I'm glad that we started at least using, and even when my team comes back and says that they're frustrated, you're not seeing the consistency, it's okay. I mean, keep doing it. We'll get there. And I think but if you say what is EdTech likely to focus on, and I think that's what I think we all are going to be focused on, whether we're building a learning product or whether we are using it ourselves internally for running our own businesses.
Yeah. And continuing right on the discussion with AI, as you said in the beginning, we're going to be talking a lot about it for this video. But with all this talk about how AI may or may not reshape education or just add more noise to what's already going on out there, what do you think the edtech industry is getting right about AI, and what is it getting wrong?
I've said this a few times in my conversations with my clients, with my team members, as well as in some of the conferences where I've had the opportunity to get onto a podium and talk about it. I think AI makes a lot of things easy for us. Back in my time when I was growing up, just discovering content was very painful. And so part of grading was, hey, you managed to get to the right content. That was part of the grading. AI makes it very easy. So now when I'm looking at, how AI will impact learning, so content discovery, perhaps easy. Organizing the content, perhaps easy, right? Even comprehending the content, perhaps easy, right? But then we have to go back and ask the question that is actually the learning taking place, you know?
Yeah.
So have I really understood the concept? Right? Has the student understood the concept? And therefore, in the world where students are going to use AI, and we should allow them to, we should still challenge them in whether learning has taken place or not. So how do we therefore, like what the conversations that I'm having with my customers is that let's look at how we will measure learning now, because now we will not measure the way we used to measure learning earlier. We will say that given that the student is using AI, let's see whether the student has applied the learning to something which is real life, which is a little more practical, or let's see whether the student is able to come out with their own critical thinking to that concept of, whatever the concept is being taught. And I do the same even in my workplace where my team is allowed to use AI for all the work that they do. Obviously, it helps us, it improves our efficiency. But I also want to ensure that they're just not pulling something out of AI and just throwing it out on the table and justifying an investment that we have to do in the coming year. Say, no, tell me why. Think about it. What does it mean to us, right? So I think critical thinking is very important. I hope that we get that right. We just don't let AI just take over and replace the foundational learning that we are supposed to do. So one of the things we should do is how we measure learning. That will have to change. And what we will emphasize going forward, that we'll have to think through. And it'll take some years before we get that right.
Definitely. I think you're spot on in terms of what other conversations are going on with assessments and really what people like such as us are trying to build to get to that point of how we measure learning now with this whole AI tool being so integrated into our day-to-day. So very well said, Acky.
Thank
And
you.
coming into our last question, transitioning a little bit maybe away from AI.
Thank you for that.
I was like, I know we're trying to give some balance, but I feel like AI always dominates the conversation. But moving into accessibility, which is very near and dear to our hearts and what we help a lot of clients with. And we know it's becoming a major priority in general for schools, higher education, not just because of WCAG to compliance, but then also just to make sure that all content is truly accessible for every learner. How do you see this influencing the direction of the edtech industry as a whole?
So you kind of answered my question already. In the way you framed it. That is, we have to, as edtech company, we have to think about, learning for everyone, right? I mean, we have to care about every learner that is out there. So we have to build a product keeping that in mind. So universal design allows you to reach every learner in a kind of effective way. So it should not be mandate driven. It should not be forced upon you that you have to make it accessibility compliant. You have to think it from design that this is something that you need to do because you care about every learner on the planet. Number one. Number two, I think it is, in my opinion, it's a competitive advantage for an edtech company to build a learning product which caters to every learner. Why wouldn't you, right? I mean, it will get you better market share. help you serve diverse demographics, and it will ensure that you are able to retain your customers, right? Um, there's another thing about our business, right, which is that when you're building new digital learning products, it's easy. Well, I would say relatively easy because you think universal design from write the word go and design it that way.
Right.
But our industry also has a lot of legacy content. It's huge. You can't just ignore that. It was designed and built at a time when people weren't thinking, you know, serving all the learners. I mean,
Right.
they just build it for the mass, right?
Yeah.
So I think, going back and fixing that legacy content to become more, available, in a universal design fashion to all the learners, that's huge cost, right? And so when we working with our clients, we are working with them to create, like ROI framework that helps them understand the benefit of investing money in making a product accessible, because it will help them retain their clients. It will help them retain their revenue. So their strategy is a little bit different. It's the retention strategy. And mind you, that is today bulk of the task. And but the good news is that everybody is wanting to do it. Everybody has the intention to do it. The customers, the institutions, educational institutions, as well as corporates, are now saying that the products should be compliant on the minimum. And if you give them something more, they're going to take it. And that is going to be a competitive advantage for an EdTech company which launches a new product or even goes back and fixes their legacy product to meet the customer demand. So I see it more as, competitive advantage. We should go beyond the mandates.
For sure. And I like the two differentiate points that you highlighted in terms of going back to the legacy content or truly just when a company or school is starting, making the new content just accessible from the start.
Yes.
It's really two avenues to explore there with this.
And I think, very few people talk about the legacy. They
Yeah.
always talk about the designing new products. Therefore, let's build it this way. Yeah, sure. But I think, education business has been around for some time. And digital learning has been around for some time, and we therefore have enough legacy content that we have to look at.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, we're at the end of our episode. Is there any final words or advice that you'd like to add before we close out?
No, I mean, it's been fun talking to you. Those all three topics were very relevant for our times. I continue to remain excited about the industry and where it is going. And there are more opportunities today than I've ever seen before.
It's an exciting time to be in education and EdTech.
Absolutely, yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Acky, for coming out and having this conversation with me. And for our listeners, I hope you
Thank you
learned.
very much.
Yeah, I hope you learned something new today about where the industry is going for 2026 and beyond. Make sure to check out all of our other videos, such as EdTech Connect, Innovators in Conversation, Educator Insights, in Tech and EdTech. Thank you so much. Bye.